The sun painted bloody streaks across the Colorado sky as Nora Zimmerman fled across the dusty plains, her heart hammering against her ribs like a wild Mustang. A bullet whistled past her ear, kicking up dirt where she had stood just seconds before. She wasn't going to die here, not today, not like this. The distant silhouette of Aure's mountains promised salvation, if only she could reach them before her pursuers caught up or her strength gave out. Aure, Colorado, 1878, a silver mining town nestled in the San Juan Mountains where fortunes were made and lost daily. For Nora, it represented her last chance at escape, her final opportunity to outrun both her past and the men determined to drag her back to it. She'd been running for 3 days straight, stealing moments of sleep in abandoned barns and surviving on whatever scraps she could find. Her once fine dress was torn and mudded, her dark hair a tangled mess, and her feet blistered inside boots not made for such a desperate journey. As the mountains of Aure grew larger on the horizon, Nora's vision began to blur. Exhaustion pulled at her limbs like quicksand. The sound of hoofbeats grew louder behind her, and she knew her time was running out. With one last burst of energy, she pushed forward, but her legs finally betrayed her. She stumbled, falling hard onto the unforgiving ground. The hoofbeats slowed. Nora turned her head, ready to face her pursuers, but instead of the men she expected, a single rider approached. Tall and broad-shouldered, he sat astride a magnificent chestnut stallion, his face shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat. "Madam," the stranger called, his voice deep and steady as he dismounted. "Are you hurt?" Nora scrambled backward, dirt and rocks digging into her palms. "Stay back." The man stopped, holding his hands up in a placating gesture. "I mean no harm. Saw you fall from a ways back." She studied him through narrowed eyes. His clothes were trail-worn but well-kept denim pants, a faded blue shirt, and a leather vest. A gun hung low on his hip, but he made no move toward it. "Are you running from something?" he asked, his gaze moving past her to scan the horizon. "Or someone?" "That's none of your concern," Nora replied, struggling to her feet. Her knees buckled immediately, and she would have fallen again if not for his quick reflexes. His strong hands caught her arms, steadying her. "I'd say it becomes my concern when I find a woman half dead on the trail to Aure," he said, his eyes a startling blue against his sun-bronzed skin searching her face. Nora pulled away from his grasp. "I don't need your help. Evidence suggests otherwise." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Name's Kieran Hayes. Most folks call me Hayes." "I didn't ask," she said, even as blackness threatened the edges of her vision. The world tilted dangerously. "And you are," he pressed, apparently unbothered by her rudeness. "Leaving," Nora managed before her legs gave out completely. Hayes caught her before she hit the ground, lifting her easily into his arms. "Seems to me you're staying, at least until you can stand without keeling over." Too weak to protest, Nora could only watch as he carried her to his horse. "They'll find me," she whispered, more to herself than to him. "Who will?" Hayes asked, setting her gently on his saddle. The sound of distant gunfire provided her answer. Hayes turned sharply toward the sound, his hand moving instinctively to his gun. "3 men," Nora explained, her voice faint. "They've been tracking me since Denver." Hayes's expression hardened. "Friends of yours?" "Hardly." Bitter laughter escaped her cracked lips. "They work for a man named Victor Blackstone. I took something from him." "Must be something valuable," Hayes remarked, swinging up behind her on the horse, his ledger. Nora's fingers instinctively touched the small book hidden in her bodice. "It contains evidence of every crooked deal, every bribe, every murder he's arranged. It could destroy him." "And you stole it?" Hayes clicked his tongue. "That's either very brave or very foolish." "I'm beginning to think the latter." Nora admitted as Hayes urged his horse into a gallop, heading straight for our ray. "Why take such a risk?" he asked, his breath warm against her ear as he leaned forward to increase their speed. "He killed my father," Nora said simply. "Made it look like suicide, but I know better. My father was investigating Blackstone's operations. This ledger proves it wasn't suicide, it was murder." Hayes was silent for a long moment, the only sound the rhythmic pounding of hooves against hard, packed earth. Finally, he said, "Our Ray's sheriff is a good man. We'll take this to him." Nora twisted to look at him. No authorities. Blackstone owns half the lawmen in Colorado territory." "Not Sheriff Miller," Hayes assured her. "He's as honest as they come." "You don't understand," Nora insisted. "These men won't stop. They'll kill anyone who stands in their way. I shouldn't have involved you." She slumped against him, the last of her strength ebbing away. "Just let me go. I'm not worth saving." Hayes's arm tightened around her waist. "Let me decide that for myself," he said firmly. "Now hold on tight. We've got a ways to go yet." As consciousness slipped away from her, Nora found herself wondering about this stranger who had appeared like an apparition in her moment of need. Why would he risk his life for someone he didn't know? The question followed her into darkness as she passed out in his arms. When Nora next opened her eyes, she was lying on a bed in a simply furnished room. Sunlight streamed through lace curtains, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air. For a moment, confusion held her in its grip. Where was she? Then memory returned in a rush, her desperate flight, the pursuing men, and the stranger named Hayes who had come to her aid. She sat up too quickly, and the room spun. A cool hand pressed against her shoulder, easing her back down. "Easy there," said a woman's voice. "You're safe, but you need rest." Nora blinked, focusing on the woman beside the bed. She was older, perhaps in her 50s, with kind eyes and silver-streaked hair pulled back in a practical bun. "Where am I?" Nora asked, her voice raspy from thirst. "You're at my boarding house in our Ray," the woman replied, pouring water from a pitcher into a glass. "I'm Martha Wilson. Kieran brought you here yesterday evening." Nora accepted the water gratefully, drinking deeply. "Where is he now, Hayes?" Martha smiled. "Gone to speak with Sheriff Miller, I expect. He said he had matters to discuss." She studied Nora with obvious concern. "You were in quite a state when he carried you in. Nearly scared the life out of my boarders." Remembrance struck Nora like a physical blow. "The men who were chasing me, have they come to our Ray?" "Not that I've heard," Martha said, taking the empty glass. "Though Hayes seemed concerned about that possibility. He asked me to keep you hidden and not mention your presence to anyone." Relief washed over Nora, but it was short-lived. Blackstone's men wouldn't give up so easily. She needed to move on to find a way to use the evidence she carried. "I can't stay," she said, throwing back the covers. "I've put you in danger just by being here." Martha pressed her back firmly. "Nonsense." "Whatever trouble you're in," Hayes seems determined to help. "That man's stubborn as a mule when he sets his mind to something." Her expression softened. "He said to tell you he'd be back before noon and to stay put until then." "You don't understand," Nora protested. "The men looking for me are dangerous. They won't hesitate to hurt anyone who helps me." "Child," Martha said patiently, "I've lived in mining towns for 30 years. I've seen my share of dangerous men." She straightened the bed covers with practiced efficiency. "Besides, Hayes can handle himself. He wasn't always a rancher, you know." "What was he before?" Nora asked despite herself. Martha's eyes twinkled. "That's his story to tell, not mine. Now, how about some breakfast? You look like you haven't eaten in days." Before Nora could respond, the door opened, and Hayes himself entered, carrying a tray laden with food. His presence filled the small room immediately, and Nora was struck again by his imposing figure. In the daylight, She could see him more clearly, the strong line of his jaw beneath several days' worth of stubble, the crow's feet at the corners of his eyes that spoke of laughter as much as squinting into the sun. "You're awake," he said, setting the tray on a small table. "Good. We have things to discuss." Martha rose, straightening her apron. "I'll leave you two to talk. Remember what I said, Hayes, she needs rest." He nodded, and Martha departed, closing the door behind her. "You went to the sheriff," Nora accused as soon as they were alone. Hayes pulled a chair up to the bedside and sat, his movements deliberate. "I did," he confirmed. "But I didn't mention you or the ledger. Just asked if he'd heard of Blackstone." "And," Nora pressed, "and he has. Said the man's got influence stretching from Denver to Durango." Hayes leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "He also mentioned rumors about Blackstone's less legitimate ventures. Your story holds water." Nora exhaled slowly. "So now you believe me?" "I believed you before," Hayes said, "but I needed to know what we're up against." "We?" Nora repeated incredulously. "There is no we. This is my fight, Mr. Hayes. It became mine when I picked you up off the trail," he countered. "And it's just Hayes." Nora studied him, trying to discern his motives. "Why would you risk your life for a stranger?" Something flickered in his eyes, a shadow of old pain, quickly masked. "Let's just say I recognize injustice when I see it." He gestured to the tray. "You should eat. You'll need your strength." The aroma of eggs, bacon, and fresh bread made Nora's stomach growl audibly. She hadn't realized how hungry she was. As she ate, Hayes outlined what he'd learned. 3 riders came into town last night asking questions. They claimed to be looking for a runaway sister, but their description matched you. Miller didn't tell them anything, but they're staying at the hotel. Nora's hand trembled, nearly spilling her coffee. "They found me." "They suspect you might be here," Hayes corrected. "But they don't know where. Miller's keeping an eye on them." "We can't involve the sheriff," Nora insisted. "Blackstone has people everywhere." "Miller's not on Blackstone's payroll," Hayes said confidently. "But I understand your caution. That's why I've made other arrangements." "What kind of arrangements?" Hayes stood, moving to the window. He pushed the curtain aside slightly, peering out at the street below. "I own a ranch about 10 miles outside of town. It's isolated, defensible. We'll go there tonight after dark." "And then what?" Nora asked, setting aside her half-eaten breakfast. "Hide forever." He turned to face her, his expression serious. "No, we use the ledger. Send copies to newspapers, territorial officials who can't be bought. But we need to be smart about it. One wrong move and Blackstone will bury the evidence and us along with it." Nora's fingers found the ledger, still safely hidden. "You'd risk everything to help me expose him." "You don't even know me." "I know enough," Hayes said. "I know you're willing to risk your life for justice. That tells me something about your character." Their eyes met across the room, and something unspoken passed between them, a recognition, perhaps, of a kindred spirit. Nora looked away first, uncomfortable with the intensity of his gaze. "You should rest," Hayes said, heading for the door. "I'll come back after nightfall. Martha will help you prepare." "Wait," Nora called as his hand touched the doorknob. "Thank you for saving me." Hayes paused, looking back over his shoulder. "Don't thank me yet, Miss Zimmerman. We're not out of this alive." The door closed behind him, leaving Nora alone with her thoughts and the weight of the ledger against her skin. Despite her exhaustion, sleep eluded her. Every sound from the street below made her tense, expecting Blackstone's men to burst in at any moment. When darkness finally fell, Martha returned with fresh clothes, a simple skirt, blouse, and sturdy boots more suited for ranch life than the tattered dress Nora had arrived in. "Hayes thought these might fit you," Martha explained, helping Nora dress. "They belong to his sister." "He has a sister?" Nora asked, surprised by this personal detail. Martha's face grew solemn. Had she passed some years back. Influenza took her and her husband both, leaving their boy an orphan. Hayes raised him since he was knee-high. He has a nephew. Nora absorbed this new information, trying to reconcile it with the hard-edged man she'd met. Liam. He's 16 now, working the ranch alongside his uncle. Martha's hands were gentle as she brushed Nora's hair. Hayes would do anything for that boy. He's all the family he has left. This glimpse into Hayes's private life gave Nora pause. He had responsibilities, people who depended on him. Yet he was risking everything to help her. He shouldn't be involved in this, Nora murmured. It's too dangerous. Martha secured Nora's hair in a practical braid. That man's been through worse and come out the other side. Don't underestimate him. Before Nora could ask what Martha meant, a soft knock came at the door. Hayes entered, now dressed in darker clothes, a rifle slung over his shoulder. "It's time," he said. "There's a back way out. My horse is waiting in the alley." Nora embraced Martha quickly. "Thank you for everything." "Go on now," Martha said, patting her cheek. "And remember, you're stronger than you think." Hayes led Nora through the darkened house to a rear exit. The night air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine from the surrounding mountains. His chestnut stallion stood quietly in the shadows, saddled and ready. "Stay close," Hayes whispered, helping her mount before swinging up behind her. "We'll take the back streets. Keep your head down." They moved through our array like ghosts, Hayes guiding the horse with expert precision. The town was still awake, light and laughter spilling from saloons and boarding houses, but they kept to the darkness between. Once they reached the outskirts, Hayes urged the horse into a canter. The moon rose higher as they traveled, illuminating the rugged landscape. Mountains loomed around them, silver-tipped in the moonlight. The trail narrowed, winding up through pine forests and rocky passes. Despite her anxiety, Nora found herself marveling at the wild beauty of the San Juans. "Not much farther," Hayes said after they'd been riding for nearly an hour. "Ranch is just over that ridge." As they crested the hill, Nora caught her first glimpse of Hayes's home, a sprawling ranch nestled in a protected valley. A large cabin stood at its center, with a barn and several outbuildings clustered nearby. A creek ran along one side, reflecting moonlight like scattered silver coins. "It's beautiful," Nora said softly. "It's home," Hayes replied, a note of pride in his voice. As they approached, the cabin door opened and a lanky figure stepped out, rifle in hand. "That'll be Liam," Hayes explained. "He's keeping watch." "Uncle Kieran," the boy called as they drew closer. "It's me," Hayes confirmed, dismounting before helping Nora down. "Everything quiet?" "Yes, sir," Liam replied, lowering his rifle. In the lantern light from the doorway, Nora could see the family resemblance, the same strong jawline, though Liam's features still held the softness of youth. His eyes widened at the sight of Nora. "Is this her? The lady you went to help?" "This is Miss Zimmerman," Hayes confirmed. "Miss Zimmerman, my nephew Liam." "Thank you for opening your home to me," Nora said, offering her hand. Liam took it awkwardly, a blush creeping up his cheeks. "Uncle said you're in trouble, said we'd be helping you." "Your uncle has already done more than enough," Nora replied, glancing at Hayes. "But yes, I am in a difficult situation." "Let's get inside," Hayes interrupted, taking the reins of his horse. "Liam, tend to Rusty while I get Miss Zimmerman settled. Then join us. You should hear this too." The interior of the cabin was warm and inviting, far more comfortable than Nora had expected. A fire crackled in a stone hearth, casting dancing shadows on walls adorned with simple but tasteful furnishings. Books lined shelves along one wall, a surprising touch that spoke of an educated mind. "Sit," Hayes instructed, gesturing to a sturdy table in what served as the kitchen. "Are you hungry?" "No, thank you," Nora replied, though in truth, her stomach was knotted with anxiety rather than hunger. Hayes busied himself making coffee while they waited for Liam. When the boy returned, the three of them sat at the table, and Hayes nodded to Nora. "You should tell Liam what you told me," he said. "He needs to understand the risk." Nora took a deep breath and recounted her story, how her father, a respected lawyer in Denver, had begun investigating Victor Blackstone's business practices after suspicions arose about his mining operations. How her father had discovered evidence of claim jumping, bribery, and even murder. How he had been found dead in his office, a bullet in his head and a whiskey bottle at his side. "They called it suicide," Nora said, her voice tight with controlled emotion. "Said the pressure of his work had broken him, but my father didn't drink and he never would have taken his own life." "So you went after Blackstone yourself," Liam said, his young face serious. Nora nodded. "I took a position as a secretary in his office. It took months to gain his trust enough to access his private records. And then I found this." She withdrew the ledger from inside her blouse and placed it on the table. Hayes opened it carefully, leafing through pages of neat handwriting. "Names, dates, amounts," he murmured. "Payments to officials, notes about problems being handled." "On page 32, Nora directed, "there's an entry from last April. It simply says Zimmerman closed $500. The date is the day my father died." Liam let out a low whistle when Hayes found the entry. "That's proof he ordered a hit." "It's circumstantial," Hayes said, though his jaw tightened. "But combined with the rest, it paints a damning picture." He closed the ledger. "No wonder Blackstone wants this back. And wants me silenced," Nora added quietly. Liam leaned forward, his young face earnest. "So what's the plan, Uncle?" Hayes ran a hand through his hair, his expression thoughtful. "We need to make copies of the most damning pages. Send them to newspapers in Denver, San Francisco, even back east, and to the territorial governor who's beyond Blackstone's reach." "The governor's in Denver," Nora pointed out. "Getting this to him won't be easy." "I know someone," Hayes said. "An old friend who works as a messenger for the territorial office. He passes through our array every few weeks. If we can get copies to him, he'll deliver them directly." "And in the meantime," Nora asked, "Blackstone's men are in our array. They won't give up. In the meantime, you stay here where it's safe." Hayes's tone brooked no argument. "Liam and I will take turns keeping watch. Nobody comes up this way without us knowing about it." Liam nodded eagerly. "I'm a good shot, Miss Zimmerman. No one will get past me." Nora looked from uncle to nephew, touched by their determination but troubled by the danger she'd brought to their doorstep. "I can't ask you both to risk your lives for me." "You didn't ask," Hayes reminded her. "I offered." "Why?" The question had been burning in her since he'd first rescued her. "Why would you do all this for a stranger?" Hayes was silent for a long moment, his blue eyes fixed on the fire. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower, roughened by memory. "Before I settled here, I rode with a man named Marshal Frank Canton. Worked as a deputy U.S. Marshal in Wyoming Territory during some troubled times." Nora's eyes widened slightly. She knew that name. Canton was legendary in law enforcement circles throughout the West. "I've seen what happens when powerful men think they're above the law," Hayes continued. "Seen innocent people crushed under their boot heels. I hung up my badge years ago, but some things a man doesn't forget." He looked directly at Nora. "What Blackstone did to your father, ordering a man's death, like it was nothing more than a business transaction, that kind of evil doesn't get to win. Not if I can help it." His words hung in the air between them, charged with a conviction that stirred something in Nora's chest, something beyond gratitude, something that made her breath catch. "Uncle was the best deputy in Wyoming. Liam said proudly, breaking the moment. Still has his badge somewhere. Hayes smiled slightly. That was another life, Liam. I'm just a rancher now. A rancher who still practices with his colt every morning, Liam countered with a grin. Old habits, Hayes said with a shrug. He rose from the table. It's late. We should all get some rest. Tomorrow we'll start making those copies. He showed Nora to a small but comfortable bedroom that had clearly been hastily prepared. It's not much, he apologized, but you'll be safe here. It's perfect, Nora assured him. Then, impulsively, she touched his arm. Thank you, Hayes. Not just for saving me, but for believing me when no one else would. Something flickered in his eyes, a warmth that transformed his rugged features. Get some sleep, Miss Zimmerman. Dawn comes early in these mountains. After he left, Nora sat on the edge of the bed, the events of the past days washing over her. For the first time since her father's death, she felt a glimmer of hope. In this remote ranch with an ex-lawman and his nephew as allies, perhaps she could finally see justice done. She slept better that night than she had in months. The next morning dawned clear and crisp. Nora woke to the smell of coffee and bacon and the sound of voices from the main room. Dressing quickly in the clothes Martha had provided, she followed her nose to the kitchen, where Hayes was teaching Liam how to properly fry eggs without breaking the yolks. Good morning, Hayes greeted her, his eyes warming at the sight of her. How did you sleep? Better than I expected, Nora admitted, accepting the cup of coffee he offered. What's the plan for today? First, breakfast, Hayes said firmly. Then we start copying that ledger. The task proved more daunting than anticipated. The ledger contained over 100 pages of entries, many in shorthand or code. Nora, familiar with Blackstone's system from her time in his office, translated while Hayes and Liam took turns copying the most incriminating sections. We'll need to explain what these entries mean, Nora said, pointing to a particularly damning page. To an outsider, this could look like legitimate business. We'll include a letter, Hayes agreed. Your statement about what you witnessed, what your father discovered. The more detailed, the better. They worked through the morning and into the afternoon. Liam proved surprisingly adept at copying, his handwriting neat and precise. By mid-afternoon, they had completed copies of 20 key pages, along with Nora's detailed explanation of their significance. That should be enough to get the authorities interested, Hayes said, reviewing their work. Once they start digging, they'll find more. If they're willing to dig at all, Nora said, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. After my father died, I went to 3 different lawmen. None would investigate. The territorial governor will, Hayes assured her. He's built his reputation on fighting corruption. This is exactly the kind of case he's looking for. A sudden bark from outside interrupted their conversation. Hayes was on his feet instantly, hand going to the pistol at his hip. That's Ranger, Liam said, referring to their ranch dog. Someone's coming. Hayes moved to the window, peering out cautiously. Single rider, he reported. It's Miller. Relief washed over Nora, quickly followed by concern. The sheriff. Why would he come all the way out here? Let's find out. Hayes headed for the door, signaling for Nora to stay back. She and Liam watched from the window as Sheriff Miller dismounted, looking trail-worn and anxious. The 2 men spoke briefly outside before Hayes led the sheriff into the cabin. Miller removed his hat, revealing a head of graying hair and a weathered face. His eyes found Nora immediately. Miss Zimmerman, he said with a respectful nod. Glad to see you're safe. What brings you out here, Sheriff? Nora asked, still wary of any lawman. Miller exchanged a glance with Hayes before answering. Those men looking for you haven't left town. They've been asking questions, showing your picture around. This morning, they offered a $100 reward for information on your whereabouts. Nora paled. $100 would be tempting to many in a mining town. Already had 3 people come to my office claiming they'd seen you, Miller confirmed. I sent them away, but it's only a matter of time before someone points those men in this direction. Hayes's expression hardened. You think someone knows she's here? Martha wouldn't tell, Liam protested. No, she wouldn't, Miller agreed. But someone might have seen you leaving town or noticed Hayes's absence. People talk, especially when there's money involved. Hayes moved to the rifle rack on the wall, taking down a Winchester. Then we need to be ready for visitors. There's more, Miller said grimly. I sent a wire to a friend in the Denver marshal's office, asking about these men. Got a reply this morning. They're not just hired guns, they're professional killers. The leader, a man named Corbin, has 5 dead lawmen to his name. The room fell silent as this news sank in. Nora felt a cold knot of fear form in her stomach. These weren't just men doing a job, they were experienced killers who wouldn't hesitate to murder everyone at the ranch to get what they wanted. Sheriff, she said, her voice steady despite her fear, we have evidence against Blackstone. Proof of corruption, bribery, and murder, including my father's. Miller's eyebrows rose. Actual proof? Hayes nodded toward the table where the ledger and copies lay. Enough to hang him if it reaches the right hands. Miller examined the documents, his frown deepening as he read. This is dynamite, all right. No wonder he wants it back so badly. He looked up at Hayes. What's your plan? Get copies to the territorial governor through a trusted messenger, Hayes explained. Expose Blackstone publicly so he can't simply make this disappear. Good plan, Miller said. But you need to accelerate it. Those men in town, they're getting impatient. I'd wager they'll be making a move within a day or two. My contact doesn't come through our array for another week, Hayes said, concern evident in his voice. Miller thought for a moment. I could take the copies. I'm riding to Silverton tomorrow on official business. From there, I can send them by express courier to Denver. Hope flared in Nora's chest, but Hayes looked skeptical. No offense, Sheriff, but we're being careful about who we trust. Miller smiled grimly. Smart. But I've got personal reasons to want Blackstone taken down. My brother worked a claim near one of his operations, had an accident after he refused to sell out. Hayes studied the older man, then nodded slowly. If you can get these to the governor, it would save us considerable risk. Consider it done, Miller promised. I'll leave at first light tomorrow. As the men discussed logistics, Nora found herself watching Hayes, the confident set of his shoulders, the decisive way he spoke, the careful attention he paid to every detail. In just 2 days, he had become her champion, her protector, her hope for justice. And something else was growing within her, a feeling she couldn't name, or perhaps was afraid to. When Miller departed, carrying the copied evidence secured inside his coat, a strange mix of hope and foreboding settled over the ranch. If the sheriff succeeded, Blackstone's days of power were numbered. But until then, they were in grave danger. We should prepare, Hayes said, checking his rifle. If those men are coming, we need to be ready. I can help, Nora insisted. I won't be a helpless burden. Hayes looked at her, his expression softening. I know you won't. Can you shoot? My father taught me, Nora replied. I'm not expert, but I can hit what I aim at. He nodded, satisfied. Good. Liam, show Miss Zimmerman where we keep the extra ammunition. I'll check the outbuildings, make sure they're secured. As Hayes headed outside, Liam led Nora to a cabinet where various firearms and ammunition were stored. The boy moved with the confidence of someone who had grown up around guns, handling them with appropriate respect. Uncle's worried, Liam said quietly as he counted cartridges. I can tell. He has reason to be, Nora replied. These men are dangerous. Liam looked up at her, his young face serious beyond his years. He likes you, you know. I haven't seen him take to someone so quick since. Well, ever. Nora felt her cheeks warm. He's a good man helping a stranger in trouble, that's all. Liam's knowing smile suggested he thought otherwise, but he didn't press the point. Uncle always says character shows when trouble comes. Guess we're about to see everyone's character real clear. That night, they took turns keeping watch. Hayes insisted that Nora rest first, while he and Liam patrolled the perimeter of the ranch. Despite her exhaustion, sleep eluded her. Every sound, the creak of the cabin settling, the distant howl of a coyote sent her heart racing. When it was her turn to watch, Nora sat by the window, a rifle across her lap, staring out at the moonlit valley. Hayes joined her after ensuring Liam was asleep, pulling up a chair beside hers. "You should rest too," Nora said softly. "You've barely slept since you found me." "I'll sleep when this is over," Hayes replied, his voice low. In the silvery light, the planes of his face seemed carved from stone, but his eyes held a warmth that belied his rugged exterior. "What will you do?" Nora asked. "After, I mean, if we succeed against Blackstone." Hayes was silent for a long moment, his gaze on the distant mountains. "Continue ranching. Watch Liam grow into a man. Simple things." "Simple things can be the most precious," Nora observed. "What about you?" Hayes turned the question back on her. What does Nora Zimmerman want from life once justice is done? The question caught her off guard. She had been so focused on avenging her father that she had given little thought to what came after. "I don't know," she admitted. "Before all this, I dreamed of opening a small bookshop. My father loved books, passed that love to me." "Our Ray could use a bookshop," Hayes said, a smile touching his lips. "Nearest one's in Montrose, almost 40 miles away." The casual suggestion that she might stay, might build a life here, sent an unexpected thrill through Nora. "Are you offering me a reason to stay, Mr. Hayes?" In the moonlight, she saw color rise in his cheeks, a surprising display of vulnerability from such a formidable man. "I'm suggesting that our Ray has much to recommend it," he said carefully. "Good people, beautiful country, and at least one former lawman who's handy in a crisis," Nora added with a small smile. Their eyes met, and something electric passed between them. Hayes leaned forward slightly, and for a breathless moment, Nora thought he might kiss her. Instead, he reached out to tuck a stray lock of hair behind her ear, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. "We should focus on surviving first," he murmured. "Dreams can wait until you're safe." The intimate moment was shattered by the sound of Ranger barking furiously outside. Hayes was on his feet instantly, rifle in hand. "Stay here," he ordered, moving to the door. "Hayes," Nora began, but he was already gone, slipping out into the night. Minutes stretched like hours as she waited, straining to hear over the pounding of her heart. When the door finally opened again, she nearly cried out in relief. "False alarm," Hayes reported, though his expression remained tense. "Ranger was after a raccoon in the barn." "You don't look convinced," Nora observed. Hayes shook his head slightly. "Something doesn't feel right." "Ranger doesn't usually raise that kind of fuss over local wildlife." He crossed to where Liam slept and gently shook the boy awake. "Liam, I need you alert. I'm going to make another round of the property." "What is it, Uncle?" Liam asked, instantly awake. "Probably nothing," Hayes said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "But keep Miss Zimmerman inside, away from the windows, and keep your rifle handy." After Hayes left again, Nora and Liam waited in tense silence. The minutes ticked by, marked only by the steady tick of the clock on the mantel. When half an hour had passed with no sign of Hayes, worry gnawed at Nora's insides. "He's been gone too long," she said finally. "Something's wrong." Liam nodded, his young face grave. "I'll go look for him." "No," Nora said firmly. "Your uncle would want you to stay here. I'll go." But he said, I know what he said, Nora interrupted. But if something's happened to him, we need to know. I can move quietly and I know how to use this. She held up the pistol Hayes had given her earlier. Liam looked torn but finally nodded. Be careful. If you're not back in 10 minutes, I'm coming after you both. Nora slipped out the back door into the cool night air. The moon had risen higher, casting long shadows across the yard. She moved from shadow to shadow, making her way toward the barn where Hayes had last gone. The barn door stood slightly ajar. Nora approached cautiously, her heart in her throat. From inside came the soft sound of movement, a boot against straw, the creak of wood. Hayes, she called softly, pushing the door open wider. The blow came from behind something hard, connecting with the back of her head. Pain exploded through her skull, and darkness rushed in from all sides. As consciousness slipped away, she heard a man's voice, not Hayes's, say, Got her. Find the ledger. Nora woke to the sensation of being carried. Her head throbbed viciously, and for a moment, confusion reigned. Then memory returned: the barn, the ambush. She forced her eyes open to see the silhouette of a man she didn't recognize carrying her away from the ranch house. 2 more men walked ahead, one leading horses. Blackstone's men had found her. Fear gave her strength. With a sudden movement, Nora drove her elbow into her captor's ribs. Surprised, he loosened his grip, and she broke free, stumbling to the ground. She's awake, the man shouted, reaching for her. Nora scrambled backward, searching desperately for the pistol she'd been carrying, but it was gone. The men surrounded her, their faces hard in the moonlight. Where's the ledger, Miss Zimmerman? The leader asked a tall man with a pockmarked face she assumed must be Corbin. I don't have it, Nora replied truthfully. Sheriff Miller took it to the territorial authorities. Corbin's expression didn't change, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. You're lying. The sheriff left town this morning alone. Cold realization washed over Nora. They'd been watching Miller. They knew the copies had been made, but not where they were now. Search the house, Corbin ordered one of his men, thoroughly. What have you done with Hayes? Nora demanded, finding courage in anger. And the boy, the rancher, Corbin smiled thinly. He's alive. For now. Put up quite a fight, actually. Impressed Daniels here enough that he didn't kill him outright. He nodded toward a stocky man with a bleeding gash on his cheek. As for the boy, we haven't found him yet. Better hope we don't. Relief and fear warred in Nora's heart. If Liam had escaped, there was still hope. But Hayes, what had they done to him? Mr. Blackstone is very disappointed in you, Miss Zimmerman, Corbin continued, crouching to meet her at eye level. He trusted you in his office, and this is how you repay him. Taking private property, spreading lies. They're not lies, Nora spat. The ledger proves everything. The ledger is a business record that you've misinterpreted, Corbin said smoothly. Nothing more, but Mr. Blackstone is willing to be reasonable. Return it, sign a statement retracting your accusations, and you can walk away. He'll even provide funds for you to start a new life far from Colorado. And if I refuse, Corbin's smile disappeared. Then we find the boy, and you get to watch what happens next. After that, we'll work on changing your mind. The casual cruelty in his voice chilled Nora to the bone. These men would show no mercy to Liam, a child who had done nothing wrong beyond helping her. The ledger is in the house, she lied, buying time. Hidden under a floorboard in the bedroom where I was staying. Corbin studied her face, searching for deception. Whatever he saw apparently satisfied him, because he nodded to the third man. Go help Jackson search, under the floorboards in the bedroom. As the man headed toward the house, a shot rang out from the darkness. He crumpled to the ground, clutching his leg and howling in pain. That's far enough, Liam's voice called from somewhere in the shadows. Next one goes higher. Corbin and Daniels drew their weapons, scanning the darkness. Corbin grabbed Nora, pulling her in front of him as a shield. "Drop the gun, boy," he called out, "or I put a bullet in her head right now." "Let her go first," Liam countered, his young voice remarkably steady. Nora felt Corbin's arm tighten around her throat. "You've got 3 seconds, boy." 1. "Liam, run," Nora shouted. "Get help, too." Corbin continued, pressing his gun to her temple. A new voice cut through the night, low, dangerous, and unmistakable. "Put it down, Corbin, or you're dead before you say 3. Hayes stepped from the shadows, blood streaming from a cut above his eye, but his rifle aimed unwaveringly at Corbin's head. From another direction, Liam emerged, his own rifle trained on Daniel's. "You're outnumbered," Hayes said calmly, "and my nephew doesn't miss at this range. Let her go." For one terrible moment, Nora felt Corbin's muscles tense, felt the gun press harder against her skin. Then, slowly, he lowered the weapon. "Smart decision," Hayes said. "Now back away from her." Corbin obeyed, his face a mask of cold fury. Nora stumbled forward into Hayes's waiting arm, his left still holding the rifle steady. "Liam," Hayes called, "go to the house. Get some rope." "Uncle, they were searching for the ledger," Liam reported, not taking his eyes or rifle off Daniel's. "Did they find it?" "No, sir." "I moved it like you said." Corbin's eyes narrowed at this exchange. "This isn't over, Hayes. Blackstone has a long reach. There's nowhere in the territory you can hide." "I'm not planning to hide," Hayes replied evenly. "I'm planning to see Blackstone hang for what he's done." Liam returned with rope, and under Hayes's watchful eye they bound Corbin and Daniel securely. The third man, still bleeding from his leg wound, was similarly restrained. "What now, Uncle?" Liam asked when the task was complete. "Now we wait for morning," Hayes decided. "Then we take these men to town and let Sheriff Miller deal with them." "Miller left for Silverton," Nora reminded him. "No, he didn't," Hayes said, a grim smile touching his lips. "That was our plan all along. Make it look like the evidence had left town while keeping it here." Understanding dawned on Nora. "A deception to draw them out." Hayes nodded. "Miller's been watching the trails to the ranch since yesterday with 2 deputies. They should be here by dawn to collect our visitors." The rest of the night passed in tense vigilance. Hayes refused to leave the prisoners unguarded, despite the bleeding cut on his head where Corbin had struck him from behind. Nora cleaned the wound as best she could, her fingers gentle against his skin. "You could have been killed," she said softly, her voice catching. Hayes caught her hand in his blue eyes intent on her face. "So could you? Walking out to the barn alone, what were you thinking?" "That something had happened to you," Nora admitted. "That I couldn't bear it if—" She couldn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. Understanding passed between them, clear as the mountain air. Hayes's hand tightened around hers, and for a brief moment the danger surrounding them receded, leaving only this connection fragile, new, but undeniable. The moment was broken by Liam clearing his throat. "Uncle, riders coming." Hayes was on his feet instantly, rifle ready. But the approaching riders proved to be Sheriff Miller and his deputies, arriving with the first light of dawn. "Looks like you've had an eventful night," Miller observed dryly, surveying the bound men. "You might say that," Hayes agreed. "These gentlemen were kind enough to confess their employer's interest in Miss Zimmerman and a certain ledger." Miller dismounted, signaling his deputies to secure the prisoners. "Any of them willing to testify against Blackstone?" "Not yet," Hayes said. "But I suspect their loyalty might waver when facing murder charges." Corbin, being hauled to his feet by a deputy, spat on the ground. "You're making a mistake, Miller. Blackstone will bury you." "Not this time," Miller replied calmly. "While you boys were busy here, my deputies in town were executing a search warrant on your room at the hotel. Found some interesting telegrams from your employer. very explicit instructions. For the first time, uncertainty showed in Corbin's face. "The territorial marshal is on his way from Denver," Miller continued. "Should be here by tomorrow. He's bringing warrants for Blackstone's arrest, wire fraud, corruption, and conspiracy to commit murder." Nora felt light-headed with relief and exhaustion. "It's really happening." "He's going to face justice." "Looks that way, Miss Zimmerman," Miller confirmed. "Your evidence, combined with what we found in these men's possession, makes a solid case." As the deputies led the prisoners away, Miller turned back to Hayes. "The marshal requested that Miss Zimmerman travel to Denver to testify. He'd like you to accompany her, given your law enforcement background." Hayes glanced at Nora, a question in his eyes. She nodded slightly, and something like satisfaction settled on his features. "We'll be there," he promised. "After we've had a chance to recover from last night's excitement." After Miller and his deputies departed with their prisoners, a strange quiet fell over the ranch. The danger had passed, but its echo remained in the bloodstains on the barn floor, in the lingering tension in their muscles, in the shadows beneath Hayes's eyes. "You should rest," Nora told him, concern evident in her voice. "You've been up all night, and that head wound needs attention." Hayes looked as though he might argue, but fatigue won out. "A few hours' sleep wouldn't hurt," he conceded. "Liam, keep watch. Wake me if anything seems out of place." "Yes, sir," Liam replied, though he too looked dead on his feet. In the aftermath of danger, something had changed between them, a tentative closeness born of shared peril. As Hayes headed toward his bedroom, Nora found herself following, drawn by a need to ensure he was truly all right. At his door he turned, perhaps sensing her presence. "Nora." It was the first time he had used her given name, and the sound of it in his deep voice sent a shiver through her. "Let me check that wound one more time," she said, reaching up to touch the bandage she had applied earlier. "I'm worried about infection." Hayes caught her hand, holding it against his cheek. His blue eyes searched hers, reading the concern there and perhaps something more. "I've survived worse," he said softly. "That doesn't mean you should have to," Nora replied, her voice barely above a whisper. For a heartbeat, they stood frozen in that moment, her hand against his face, his eyes holding hers. Then, with a gentleness that belied his strength, Hayes drew her closer. When his lips met hers, Nora felt as though a missing piece of herself had finally been found. The kiss was tender, questioning, a beginning rather than a culmination. When they parted, Hayes rested his forehead against hers, his breath warm against her skin. "I've wanted to do that since I found you on that trail," he confessed, "even when I was covered in dust and half dead." Nora teased, though her heart raced at his words. "Even then," Hayes confirmed, a smile touching his lips. "Something about your spirit refusing help even when you could barely stand. I admired that." "And now?" she asked, suddenly vulnerable. Hayes's expression grew serious. "Now I admire everything about you. Your courage, your determination, your willingness to risk everything for justice." His hand came up to cup her cheek. "I know it's too soon, that we've known each other only days, but sometimes days are enough," Nora interrupted softly. "When they're the right days." His smile returned, warming his entire face. "Get some rest, Nora. We have a journey ahead of us." "And after Denver?" she dared to ask. "What then?" Hayes looked at her steadily, something powerful and unguarded in his gaze. "That depends on you. Our Ray still needs a bookshop." With those words hanging between them, a promise, a possibility, they parted to find what rest they could after the night's ordeal. The journey to Denver took 3 days by stagecoach. For Nora, who had fled the city in fear and desperation, returning felt both triumphant and terrifying. Hayes remained constantly at her side, his solid presence a comfort as they met with the territorial marshal and prepared for Blackstone's arraignment. Victor Blackstone, once one of Denver's most powerful men, looked diminished in custody, his fine clothes replaced by prison garb, his commanding presence reduced to impotent rage. When he saw Nora enter the courtroom, his eyes blazed with hatred. "He can't hurt you anymore," Hayes murmured, his hand warm at the small of her back. "I know," Nora replied. And she did know, not just because Blackstone was in custody, but because she was no longer alone in her fight. The legal proceedings moved with surprising speed. Faced with the evidence from the ledger, Blackstone's co-conspirators began turning on each other, offering testimony in exchange for leniency. Within a week, Blackstone had been indicted on multiple counts of fraud, corruption, and conspiracy to commit murder. The prosecutor believes they can convict him without a trial, Marshal Reynolds told them after a particularly productive day of depositions. He's offering Blackstone a deal: life imprisonment in exchange for a full confession. Will he take it? Nora asked, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. Or will he find another way to escape justice? He'll take it, Reynolds said confidently. His empire is crumbling. His so-called friends are abandoning him. Even his lawyers are distancing themselves. The marshal's prediction proved correct. 2 days later, Victor Blackstone pled guilty to all charges, including conspiracy to murder Edward Zimmerman. As part of his statement, he admitted ordering the hit, confirming what Nora had known in her heart all along: her father had been murdered for coming too close to the truth. When the judge pronounced Blackstone's sentence, life imprisonment at the territorial prison, Nora felt a weight lift from her shoulders. It wasn't the same as having her father back, but it was justice, the justice she had risked everything to obtain. Outside the courthouse, beneath a crystal blue Colorado sky, Hayes took her hands in his. "It's over," he said simply. "Your father can rest now." Tears welled in Nora's eyes, not the bitter tears she had shed at her father's funeral, but cleansing tears of release. "Thank you," she whispered. "For everything." Hayes brushed a tear from her cheek with his thumb. "What will you do now?" The question hung between them, weighted with possibility. In the days they had spent in Denver, their connection had deepened, stolen moments of intimacy confirming what they had both felt that night at the ranch: something rare and precious was growing between them. "I was thinking," Nora said carefully, "that our Ray really does need a bookshop." Hayes's eyes brightened. "Does it now, Hum?" She moved closer, emboldened by the look on his face. "And I happen to know a rancher there who has a fondness for books. He might appreciate having a source closer than Montrose." Hayes slipped an arm around her waist, drawing her against him. "I suspect this rancher would appreciate having the bookseller even more than the books." Their kiss, there on the courthouse steps, felt like a promise, a beginning rather than an ending. When they parted, Hayes looked at her with such tenderness that Nora felt her heart might overflow. "Marry me," he said, the words simple and direct like the man himself. Nora's breath caught. "Hayes, I know it's sudden," he continued, his voice low and urgent. "I know by all conventional wisdom we should wait, court properly, but nothing about us has been conventional from the start." His fingers tightened around hers. "Life's too short and too precious to waste time on conventions when you know what you want. And I want you, Nora Zimmerman. I want to build a life with you." Nora felt tears threaten again, but she blinked them back, wanting to see his face clearly as she gave her answer. "Yes," she said, her voice steady and sure. "Yes, I'll marry you." Joy transformed his features, making him look younger, lighter. He lifted her off her feet in an embrace that drew smiles from passers-by, spinning her once before setting her gently back on the ground. "When we get back to our Ray," he promised, "I'll get you a proper ring." Nora shook her head, smiling. I don't need a ring, I just need you. Their return to our Ray was met with celebration. News of Blackstone's downfall had spread throughout the territory, and the town welcomed them as heroes. Martha Wilson insisted on hosting an impromptu engagement party at her boarding house, where Hayes and Nora announced their intentions to the delight of their friends. Liam, upon hearing the news, had hugged Nora fiercely. "I knew Uncle would convince you to stay," he said, his young face alight with happiness. "Was I that transparent?" Hayes asked, ruffling his nephew's hair. "Only to those who know you," Sheriff Miller remarked with a knowing smile. The wedding took place 3 weeks later in our Ray's small church. Nora wore a gown of ivory satin that Martha had helped her select, with wildflowers in her hair instead of a veil. Hayes, in a new suit that fit his broad shoulders perfectly, waited for her at the altar with an expression of such love that several of the female guests were moved to tears. Liam stood proudly as his uncle's best man, while Martha served as Nora's matron of honor. When they exchanged vows, Hayes's voice never wavered, his blue eyes holding hers with absolute certainty. "I, Kieran James Hayes, take you, Nora Elizabeth Zimmerman, to be my lawfully wedded wife." The words, traditional though they were, felt new and profound in that moment, a covenant between two people who had found each other against all odds, who had faced danger together, who had chosen each other with clear eyes and full hearts. After the ceremony, the entire town seemed to turn out for the celebration. Tables were set up in the town square, laden with food and drink. Music filled the air as the sun set behind the San Juan Mountains, painting the sky in the same fiery colors Nora had seen that first day, the day Hayes had found her. As they danced beneath lantern light, Hayes held her close, his cheek against her hair. "Happy," he murmured. "More than I ever thought possible," Nora replied honestly. "A year ago I was drowning in grief, consumed by the need for justice. I never imagined I could feel this way again, hopeful, joyful, loved." Hayes drew back slightly to look into her eyes. "You deserve all of that and more, Nora Hayes." The new name sent a thrill through her. "Say that again," she requested. "Nora Hayes," he repeated, a smile spreading across his face. "My wife." Later that night, as they walked hand in hand toward the ranch that was now their shared home, the stars seemed to blanket the mountains in silver light. Liam had gone ahead with friends, giving the newlyweds time alone. "What are you thinking?" Hayes asked as they paused to gaze at the night sky. Nora squeezed his hand. "I was remembering what I said to you that first day, that I wasn't worth saving, and what I said in return," Hayes recalled. "Let me decide that for myself." "You did decide," Nora said softly, "and so did I. We saved each other." Hayes turned to her, framing her face in his hands. In his eyes, Nora saw the future stretching before them, years of love and partnership, of quiet moments and shared challenges, of building something lasting in this rugged, beautiful country. "I love you, Nora Hayes," he said, the words a vow as binding as those they had exchanged in church. "And I love you, Kieran Hayes," she replied, using his given name for the first time. "Always." Their kiss, beneath the vast Colorado sky, sealed that promise, a beginning written in starlight, a love story born in adversity and destined to endure. 5 years passed, bringing changes to our Ray and to the Hayes family. The town grew as the mining industry flourished, and with it, Nora's bookshop prospered. Located on Main Street in a charming storefront, Zimmerman Books became a gathering place for the community, a haven where miners could find adventure stories, children could discover fairy tales, and ladies could peruse the latest novels from back east. Hayes divided his time between the ranch and helping Nora with the shop. To everyone's surprise, the former lawman revealed a talent for carpentry, crafting beautiful bookshelves and reading nooks that made the store uniquely inviting. Liam, now 21, had taken on more responsibility at the ranch, showing a natural aptitude for animal husbandry and business. The greatest change, however, came in the form of twins, a boy and girl born 2 years after Hayes and Nora's wedding. Edward and Catherine Hayes, named for Nora's father and Hayes's mother, were now 3 years old, bringing laughter and chaos to the ranch house that Hayes had expanded to accommodate their growing family. On a crisp autumn morning, as golden aspens shimmered against the mountainsides, Nora stood on the porch of their home, watching Hayes teach Edward to ride his first pony. Catherine sat astride her own pony nearby, already confident despite her tender age. "She's going to be as fearless as her mother," Martha Wilson observed, joining Nora with a cup of coffee. "And as stubborn as her father," Nora added with a laugh. Martha had become like family over the years, a grandmother figure to the twins and a dear friend to Nora. She still ran her boarding house in town, but spent many weekends at the ranch. 5 years, Martha mused. Hard to believe how much has changed. Remember when you first came to our Ray? Half dead and hunted, Nora nodded, her eyes never leaving her husband and children. "Sometimes it feels like another lifetime. Other times like yesterday. You saved each other," Martha said, echoing the words Nora had spoken on her wedding night. "You gave Hayes something to care about beyond duty and responsibility, and he gave you everything," Nora finished simply. "Safety, love, family. A home." She looked at the older woman. "I never thought I'd have this, Martha. After my father died, I was so consumed by the need for justice that I couldn't see a future beyond it." Martha patted her hand. "That's because there wasn't one, not until Hayes found you on that trail. Some things are meant to be, child." As if sensing their conversation, Hayes looked up at that moment, his face breaking into a smile that still made Nora's heart skip a beat. He lifted Edward onto his shoulders and walked toward the house, Catherine trotting alongside on her pony. "Mama," Edward called excitedly. "I rode all by myself." "I saw," Nora replied, descending the porch steps to meet them. "You're becoming quite the cowboy." "Like Papa," the boy declared proudly. Hayes set him down gently. "Run inside with Aunt Martha, both of you. I need to talk to your mother for a moment." Martha took the children's hands, leading them inside with promises of cookies and stories. When they were alone, Hayes drew Nora close, his expression unusually serious. "What is it?" she asked, immediately concerned. "Is something wrong?" Hayes shook his head. "No, quite the opposite. I received a letter from Denver this morning." "Denver?" Nora tensed slightly. Despite the years that had passed, the city still held dark memories. "It's from Governor Pitkin's office," Hayes explained. "They're establishing a special commission to address corruption in the mining industry. They want me to serve on it." Nora's eyes widened. "That's a great honor." "Will you accept?" "It would mean traveling to Denver periodically," Hayes said carefully. "Being away from you and the children. I wanted to discuss it with you before deciding." The thoughtfulness of this gesture, so typical of the man she had married, warmed Nora's heart. "I think you should do it," she said without hesitation. "Your experience as a lawman combined with your knowledge of mining communities makes you perfect for the role." Relief softened Hayes's features. "You wouldn't mind the travel, the time apart?" "Of course I'd mind the time apart," Nora said, reaching up to touch his cheek. "But this is important work. What happened with Blackstone, it's still happening in other places with other powerful men. If you can help prevent that, you should." Hayes caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "I was thinking," he said, his eyes twinkling, that perhaps the commission could benefit from the perspective of someone who exposed one of the territory's most corrupt businessmen. Nora's breath caught. Me, on the commission? Why not? Hayes challenged. Your experience is unique. Your insight would be valuable. But the children, Martha, would be delighted to stay with them during our trips to Denver, Hayes pointed out. And Liam is more than capable of managing the ranch for short periods. The idea took root in Nora's mind, using her experience to help others, working alongside Hayes to make a difference beyond our array. It was an unexpected opportunity, a new chapter in their shared story. We could do this together, she said slowly, warming to the possibility. We do everything better together, Hayes replied, drawing her into his arms. That's been true from the start. As he kissed her beneath the golden aspens, Nora felt the same thrill that had coursed through her that first time on the trail to our array, when a stranger named Hayes had found her at her lowest moment and decided she was worth saving. It had been the beginning of everything, a love born in danger, tempered by adversity, and made stronger with each passing year. Later, as twilight painted the mountains in shades of purple and blue, the Hayes family gathered around their table. Hayes and Nora, Liam, the twins, and Martha. Laughter filled the expanded ranch house, along with the scent of home-cooked food and the warmth of shared stories. Looking around at the faces of her loved ones, Nora felt a profound sense of gratitude. The path that had led her to this moment had been fraught with danger and loss, but it had also brought her to Hayes, to this family, to this life filled with purpose and joy. As if reading her thoughts, Hayes reached across the table to take her hand. His blue eyes, still as striking as the day they met, held the same promise they always had, that whatever came next, they would face it together. I love you, he mouthed silently across the table. Always, Nora replied in kind. And in that simple exchange was everything: the story of a woman who once believed she wasn't worth saving, and the man who had decided otherwise. Their journey, begun in the wild heart of Colorado, continued to unfold, a love story written not in the pages of Nora's books, but in the lives they built together in the shadow of the San Juan Mountains.